Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I'm just gonna go on mute so I can just hear everybody.
Thank you, Julie. I'm sorry that you're having that trouble. So thank you for letting us know. Okay. Good morning, everyone, and welcome. We're so glad to have everyone here. I am Larimer County Commissioner Jody Shai McNally, Chair of this Colorado Forest Health Council Legislative Committee. I call this meeting to order. Thank you all for being here. Let's do roll call, if you wouldn't mind, Courtney. Thank you.
Yes. Good morning, everyone. Samantha Albert.
Present.
Good morning, Samantha. Chrissy Belton.
I'm here. Morning.
Good morning. Katie McGrath Novak.
Here.
Nice to see you, Katie. Pat Dorsey. Director Matt McCombs.
Present.
Hi, Matt. Commissioner Jody Shattuck McNally. Morning. Mark Morgan let me know he wouldn't be able to make it today. Julie Stencil.
Good morning.
Good morning, Julie. Vice Chairman Sylvan White Skunk. And Commissioner Veronica Medina. I see you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Well, we do have quorum today.
Wonderful. Thank you all. I appreciate, again, your time and attention. Our first item on our agenda is approval of the minutes. I know we just got them yesterday, but I didn't know if anyone had an, and I just see that email from Mr. Morgan. If anyone had any chance to look at them, I scanned them really quick. Did anyone have any concerns or additions or changes to the minutes? Would we be okay with going forward with approving the minutes? I would welcome a motion unless you would all like to have more time to review them. I'll welcome a motion to approve the minutes.
Approve the minutes.
This is Julie Stencil.
Cool. Do I have a first and a second?
Second.
Is there any? I think we had Katie and Julie. Thank you, Commissioner Medina. So with any other further discussion, all those in favor, say aye and kind of signal aye.
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 Is there anyone opposed? Okay, our minutes are approved. Okay, we're going to move on to the next item in our agenda. Sorry, Courtney, I'm trying to pull that back up. What's our next item? I'm sorry, I have it.
Yeah, next on the agenda, we have a legislative update.
Oh, that's right. Thank you. I wasn't sure of the order, so thank you. So yes, let's do our legislative update. And so we'll turn this over to James, I believe.
Yes, good morning, everybody. There's not been a lot of movement on the bills that this committee has kind of been watching. The Live Wildfire Ready campaign bill is still waiting for an appropriations meeting. The slash pilot and slash removal is still waiting on a meeting in appropriations. And the biochar bill is still waiting on a meeting in appropriations. I think the biggest movement that we have is on House Bill 10006. That was the Representative Velasco Rural Navigators Grant Assistance. Myself, DNR, DFPC, and the governor's office have been having very good conversations with the bill sponsors in the House. And I think we've come to a solution on an amendment to change the way this bill is being pursued. As a reminder, this bill set up some rural grant navigators and charged the Office of Economic Development and International Trade with setting up this clearinghouse website of all grants available. And these grant navigators would help rural communities apply for those grants. Those entities that I talked about had some groupthink and were like, if people are going to look for wildfire mitigation grants, they're not going to go to the Office of Economic Development, International Trade. We reached out to OEdit and their liaison to be like, do you guys actually want this program? And they're like, I mean, we'll take it, but we don't think we should be the ones to have it. And so we worked for a way to get this housed within the Colorado State Forest Service. And we changed the way that it's going to be operating from these rural grants, getting people from OEdit to write these grants, to NGOs can contract with the State Forest Service to do this work and or to help with some of that grant writing. And so we have been kind of working through this amendment. We reached out to a few NGOs that we know that were interested in this bill to see if they would have, one, the capacity, and two, the capability to do some of this work. And the ones that we reached out to seemed very, very happy and excited to do this work. And so that bill was supposed to be up yesterday, Thursday, February 22nd. However, the bill sponsor had the bill removed. I think she's got a bit of a cold, and so that's waiting to be rescheduled. But moving forward, I think that amendment is in a really good space. And so we'll be pursuing that kind of idea of NGOs partnering with the counties to offer grant assistance and grant writing and just to do the work of wildfire mitigation. Are there any questions on those? If not, I'll go into like the next bill that might have interest to this committee.
Any questions? Okay, I guess we move forward, James.
Cool. There was one bill that was introduced late last week. It is not due for a committee hearing until March 5th. This bill deals with kind of point of sale when it comes to home sales. There are 12 counties. It is a representative Story bill. I knew her when she was Senator Story. I apologize. Representative Story bill that is basically taking very high risk, high fire areas. There's 12 counties in the WUI where she is hoping to create a type of, the same way there's plumbing and asbestos certification, a wildfire mitigation certification, where in order for a sale to go through in one of these 12 counties, a certified professional, which we're still trying to define in the bill, comes and does an assessment of that homeowner's property and their defensible space. And if it clears the guidelines set forth in the Colorado State Forest Service home ignition zone, then they are giving the certification for that sale to move through. And there's two different options. Either one, the homeowner can pay to have all of that work done prior to the sale and then certified. However, if it's like a last minute, my job changed and I have to move within the month, they can actually donate 2 times what a proposal might be to actually do that mitigation work. It'll go into the home buyer's escrow, and then they can use that to buy the mitigation work that needs to be done in order for that home sale to go through. Once that money is done, any remaining money goes back to the home seller. And so that one, I know that the State Forest Service, we like the idea. Anytime there's home mitigation work to be done to protect homes and environments and communities, we're for it. I know that the governor's office may or may not have some concerns about personal property rights and stuff like that. And so we're just kind of watching that one, but I thought I'd bring that one to this group's attention. But we have until March 5th to kind of see where that one's going to land. Other than that bill, not much has kind of been moving within the legislature. I think the next big stop for this team is budget forecast, which is going to, sounds like there's a question on that one before I get into budget forecast.
No, go ahead. Well, I just have a question on their bill that I testified on yesterday that might be of interest to.
Great.
I testified as our board has signed off and endorsed Keep It Colorado for the conservation cap increase for conservation easements. And the reason I think this is related, because it could be on mountain landscapes or properties in our, because we've done this on lots of properties that have lots of connections to forests and bordering forest health or U.S. forest land. And so that passed out of the House, out of the Senate Committee, Agricultural Senate Committee, with and the big multi-page Amendment 4 was not added on, but it's moving forward. And so there is a discussion. It would be only a $75 million addition from the 45 that's been stagnant since 2014 with 45 million, which of this year, January 4th, all of it was already expended. So there was already all the, the credits were expended for everyone. So now there's like a 2-year to 3-year waiting list for everybody.
Mhm.
And this is kind of slowing down that. So it's kind of related because these are a lot of, agricultural lands, but also, lands in the forest or in the areas that we're, probably thinking about. So I just wanted to share that. And I think the governor's been, putting in some comments that some things he'd like to see changed, but I didn't know, just to let you all know that's something that could be used as a tool for, conserving some of these landscapes in our forest. So just wanted to share that. Thanks.
Do you happen to have that bill number off the top of your head, Commissioner?
Senate Bill 126.
126. I'll definitely dig into it. It sounds like there might be some what am I trying to say? The Forest Service might have some interest in it. So I'll definitely look into that one. Thank you.
Yeah, and Conservation Colorado wanted some amendments. There's some equity things in there and some other, we actually started off at 150 million, but that's not
A non-starter.
well, yeah, but it hasn't been increased, but just, and I know Keep It Colorado has quite a bit of coalition. We've signed on as a board.
Okay.
But I just want to kind of flag that one for you. Thank you.
Thank
Any other
you.
questions, comments? Commissioner Medina?
Yes, so in the comments, and I had the same questions for James, can you give us that bill number that you were talking about for the certification?
That one, sorry, yes, that one is House Bill 24-1300,
Thank you.
We had a lot of discussion on this bill yesterday and today. All 64 counties meet for meetings. I believe Commissioner Medina has been involved with that. And that bill was discussed at length. So thank you.
So the next kind of big legislative thing that's going to be happening is on March 15th. That is when we get our final budget, and that is OSPB and Legislative Council are going to give the Joint Budget Committee the dollar amount that we are going to be budgeting for this upcoming budget cycle. And so watching that closely, just making sure that all of our programs are going to get the same allotted money, that the state money is going to keep coming down. But there's one particular budget item that the Forest Service is particularly interested in. The governor's office has reached out to us in hopes that we get an additional FTE for our urban and community forestry program. So we'll be watching that one. And in my talks with Daphne, the DNR budgets, the figure setting went phenomenally. They had 16 budget requests, none of them which really touched on the forestry work, but in DNR as a whole. And of those 16 requests, 15 of them were agreed to make it into the Joint Budget Committee's bill recommendation. And the 16th one that didn't make it, Carly Jacobs, their budget director, knew, and they had offline conversations. And so it was a very successful figure setting for DNR. But I'll be watching that budget forecast and then start tracking the long bill as it's making its way through the process this year. Go ahead.
Oh, so with that, knowing that we have tried to plan for that timeline and what recommendations, if we have things we think we might want to have into that budget, does our timeline and our dates for trying to think about some of these things we might want to think about budget season and having that in mind or set, does our dates and our timeline, I know you probably don't know off the top of the head, but we'll be reviewing that at the end. Curious if we're on track to be able to.
It does.
Timing is good.
It does. Courtney and myself, and before Angela left, we made sure to make this a priority to make sure that the legislative requests and the budget requests would be done in time. Again, just the caveat that it will be for the upcoming fiscal year. So when we talk about this, it won't be implemented until 25-26. But yes, the way that we're setting up our recommendations moving forward to Forest Health Council, it will work in time for us to get potential budget requests and legislative requests in time for proper consideration.
Thank you, James.
That is all I have.
Any questions? Awesome. Well, great work. Thank you for the wonderful update. Appreciate
Thanks,
you.
committee.
And tell Daphne thanks too. Okay, we'll move on to the next item of our agenda, which is our Forest Collaboratives presentation. Excuse me, Katie. And Katie McGrath Novak is going to present today. Katie, would you like us to hold our questions to the end for your presentation, or can we ask while you're presenting?
I would say you can go ahead and ask while I'm presenting if you want, but I will not be able to, as you can see, my screen.
I'll
is kinda
check.
weird.
I'll check.
So yeah,
So-
you'll have to like interrupt me because
Yeah, so just raise your hand, and if you have a question, I'll politely find a good time to interrupt or stop Katie to ask the questions. But thank you, Katie, for this presentation. We've been looking forward to it.
yes. So does this look okay to everybody?
Yeah, Katie looks good.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, yes. So thanks for giving me the time to speak. For those of you who only know me within the Colorado Forest Health Council, my regular day-to-day job is coordinating the Colorado Forest Collaboratives Network. And so through the Colorado Forest Collaboratives Network, I put on a listening session a couple weeks ago to ask collaboratives across the state what sorts of things they would like to see from the Colorado Forest Health Council. So before I get into the recommendations that we came up with, I just wanted to get into why we should care about collaboratives, because I know not everyone knows a ton about the groups that exist or why they're important. So here on the left is a screenshot of the Colorado Atlas of Collaborative Conservation. This is just the forest collaboratives in Colorado. So hopefully you can see your own community represented here or a community near you represented, but you can see that there's a whole smattering of different forest collaboratives all across the state that are doing really great work. So these groups, it's a little hard to define them because they come in really diverse shapes and sizes, and they serve different scales all the way from like a community level or a watershed level all the way up to like the Northern Colorado Fireshed Collaborative, which serves a whole region. But generally these 4 bullets at the bottom are kind of what we look for in determining like what is a collaborative. So typically these groups are those who identify, connect, and align different interests and stakeholders. They are convening processes to co-develop plans and strategies. They support coordination of cross-boundary implementation of projects, and they provide a venue for continuous learning and adaptive management. So hopefully that kind of gives a definition for these groups. And I'm also going to go through some examples of ones that we have seen personally. So the Forest Health Council, both of our field trips that we've done in the past year have actually heavily featured collaboratives. So this one in May 2023, which I did get to attend, featured the Big Thompson Watershed Health Partnership. And that's kind of an umbrella group that pulls in a whole bunch of other collaboratives. So I listed 6 here: the Estes Valley Watershed Coalition, the Big Thompson Watershed Coalition, Larimer Conservation District, Peaks to People, Boulder County Fireshed Collaborative, and Northern Colorado Fireshed Collaborative. All of these are groups that are serving like the Larimer County area.
And this is actually the picture from the Forest Health Council tour. So that's actually the Forest
Yes.
Health Council too. So that's actually our tour for the Forest Health Council that day. So that's, so maybe we should put that there. That was really a fun field trip. So yeah.
Yeah,
thank you,
I
Katie.
wasn't sure how many of you all were there, but I think I took this picture.
No, this is actually associated with our meeting and our tour that day in May that we organized. So it's actually our Forest Health Council tour. So that's cool.
Yeah, and we got to
was
hear
a good
from
day.
some collaboratives. And then also the field trip in October, which I sadly was not able to attend, but I know that those who did attend got to go on another field trip and learn all about Envision Chaffee County, which is a collaborative that I think a lot of people look to as like a really gold star standard for the state. So yeah, I mean, both of our Forest Health Council field trips have really focused on collaboratives. So hopefully that kind of gives you an idea of the types of groups that I'm talking about here. And then I just want to put in a little plug. In September, we'll be hosting the annual Colorado Forest Collaborative Summit. And I just had a call yesterday where we were planning out our field trip, and we're going to focus on a whole bunch of different collaborative projects across La Plata County. And so we haven't nailed down the exact projects yet, but what I was hearing from our planning team is these are projects that are crossing state, federal, private lands. Tons of different funding sources go into these projects. Most of the ones we're going to go on our field trip are focusing on community wildfire readiness, but there's also a big water quality component to each of them. And the way that somebody described the projects were the agencies work with collaboratives so that the communities are ready to hit the ground running if and when wildfire hits. So preparing in advance for the worst. And lastly, if you're not convinced yet, I pulled in a couple of quotes from our awesome Forest Health Council leadership. So this one is from a video that Matt McCombs produced in support of the Colorado Forest Collaboratives Network. So in that video, he said, collaborative work across the state is leading to healthier forests and watersheds while growing the number of Colorado's fire-adapted communities. Additionally, Dan Gibbs wrote a letter of support for the Forest Collaboratives Network, and one of the pieces of that was that some of our greatest successes are thanks to collaborative leaders and partners' dedication, creativity, and ability to bring people together. So with all of that said, I hope everybody's listening for these recommendations. Like I said earlier, these were created based on a listening session that I conducted, and then I also sent out a follow-up survey to the entire Forest Collaboratives Network so that people who were able to attend the listening session could still provide their input. So recommendation number 1 is to work directly with collaboratives to create and support sustained, consistent funding models and opportunities that work. So in order for us to have the greatest impact as the Forest Health Council, we need to understand the on-the-ground experiences. And I'm always happy to pull in Forest Collaboratives representatives to talk about what they've been going through. Common challenges that people mention under this category include grant reimbursement schedules, grant match, and then lack of funding specifically for capacity. And I've put in a little quote here from our survey responses. There seems to be lots of money for implementation, but it's harder to find money for overhead costs for staff, such as admin positions. So then the second recommendation really ties directly into this one. So this one's kind of saying we should work directly with collaboratives to make really informed, locally relevant decisions. And then number 2 is to create or expand existing tools and opportunities for under-resourced communities to start and sustain collaboratives. So examples that people have come up with as far as specifics would be maybe to create a dedicated fund for communities that don't yet have a collaborative pulling all the different moving parts together, but could benefit from one. The creation of documents that would support new and growing collaboratives, such as the Forest Resilience Planning Guide that the Leveraging Resources Committee has been working on. And then human resources to provide services and training to collaboratives and to agency personnel to do this thing we call collaboration better. So another quote here, it takes resources to support collaborative efforts, from vehicle costs to be in person, to build rapport with partnering entities, to providing food and snacks to fuel important conversations, to training and conference or travel fees that ensure staff are staying up to date on the latest information and research. All of that in addition to all the other costs that are typically difficult to get funded under federal or state allocations. There was another quote I didn't put in here that was basically like, we need coffee for meetings and none of our grants will cover something like coffee. So just those little things that aren't typically covered in like implementation grants. Another response here, there used to be collaborative efforts, the Pikes Peak Wildfire Prevention Partners and the Middle Arkansas Wildfire Prevention Partners, and both of those have dissolved due to inconsistent funding and leadership. The areas across Colorado that have been most successful are the ones that have been able to develop sustained local sources of revenue. Number 3 is to formalize agency support for collaboration. So for us, this would probably be at a state level. But the reason for this is a lot of people have mentioned that like sometimes the collaborative really relies on like a single person's personality within an agency and that person really valuing collaboration. And so through turnover, if we had more leadership directed support, then hopefully through turnover, those relationships would maintain. On the other hand, people from the agencies have said that a lot of times they do value the collaborative, but they don't feel that they have either leadership support or capacity in their job to really meaningfully engage in collaboratives, or to pursue professional development around collaboration. So a specific example of what this could look like, and I can send this out in a follow-up, but the U.S. Forest Service Region 6 recently released this regional leadership vision on working with collaboratives. And it basically defines like, here's what we're looking for in a collaborative. And if a group fits that description, then we really encourage our employees to go after that and pursue that and work within that, to be able to create more locally relevant decisions and projects. Number 4 is to give ample times for collaboratives to prepare grant applications. And then if the application timeline can't be changed, at least to start preparing people with information sessions and meetings early. This seems like potentially an easy fix that the agency could do. Right now, I know in like August, September, there's like 4 or 5 different grants that go out all at the same time, and people just feel really overwhelmed with that, especially considering these groups are already usually pretty limited on capacity. A lot of the collaboratives I work with only have maybe 1 to 3 employees, and they're just really struggling to keep up. So just kind of reiterating what I said in their own words, so many grants tend to be due in the fall. Advance notice is helpful, or try to schedule grant application deadlines for a time of the year that has fewer grants due. Number 5, and I'm almost done, is to continue and expand on our work to remove barriers to prescribed fire implementation in order to make it a more readily accessible tool for practitioners. These 4 bullets, I think we've talked about a lot in this group, as well as in the Fire Commission's Prescribed Fire Subcommittee. But there's just a ton of barriers facing non-governmental organizations from doing prescribed burns and even pile burns that have been sitting on the landscape for years because they thought they'd be able to do them and then have run into all these barriers. So this quote kind of summarizes why it's so important to keep hitting on this point. Lack of opportunity for prescribed fire on private land is especially difficult when trying to increase the pace and scale of treatment. Without this option available, per acre costs are elevated, more fuels are left on the ground as chips or masticated material. This rearranges fuel and decreases the effectiveness of projects in the areas most susceptible to high damages after a fire. And so this is kind of what's going through their minds as they're trying to make this tool work. And the final recommendation I have today is people were really excited about the successful recommendation that the Forest Health Council pushed through around workforce development, and they would like to see it continue even more. And so the thing that I heard in particular is that people are really looking for kind of that next level up of workforce capacity. So forest management planners, foresters, silviculturalists. And this is a quote that I thought really succinctly summarized this one. In order to meet our pace and scale goals, we'll need additional qualified forestry contractors locally. We would love to see an investment in growing those small businesses and processing facilities. This will be a primary barrier for place-based collaboratives to get work done on the ground. And I have a speaker coming in to share a little bit more on this next time because she's a lot more versed on this, but she was talking about how their organization recently had a job opening for a forester that was a really competitive pay rate and seemed like a really good job, great location, everything. And they just were simply not getting applications and they could not figure out why. So that's the last of my recommendations. Thank you so much for listening. I do want to point out, I know that 6 is a lot and we tried to narrow them as much as we could, but there's just so much opportunity here. I do think it's worth a discussion of which of these the Leveraging Resources Committee might work on, which ones the Legislative Committee might want to work on, and which ones maybe we, prioritize the most in this first year. So I can follow up with these slides because they have a few links in them. And then I also have a detailed recommendations sheet that goes into a little bit more specifics about each of these. That is all from me.
Thank you, Katie. If you could do me a favor, can you put up the slide with all the, just for questions, the 6, do you have with all the 6 recommendations in one slide?
Yes.
Just so we have it as we're discussing.
Let me pull that up real
It'd be
quick.
helpful for me.
Oh, I don't know if I have one with all 6. Let's see if I can.
Oh, okay.
Nope, I do.
Okay. I thought I saw one.
Okay. Now I got to reshare. Okay. Can you see that?
Yes.
Okay.
And so I'm not sure we should, I think we should only comment on what we think, but not tell the leveraging resources, which I said on that committee too, but I just thought if anyone has questions first about this, and then we can kind of talk about this. So any questions or comments from anyone? Raise your hand, let me know. Samantha.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. This is super helpful. I mean, you already mentioned that the workforce bills have been, helpful for these collaboratives. Are there any specific policy or legislation requests coming from the collaboratives? Certainly this year we're kind of moving forward, but anything we could support directly in the future?
Specifically around the workforce development or bills that are already in the legislature?
Honestly, anything. I know this is a very broad question, but if they've said hey, we could really use policy to support funding for X. I mean, workforce is obviously one of them, but if there's anything else, I'd be curious to hear that.
Yeah, that's where I was trying to get specific, and there's a couple more specific I guess action items in the more detailed version that I am going to send out after this. All of these are kind of the broad buckets, and then within that it's just a matter of getting down to the specifics. So I think in number 2, specific legislation or specific funding could be around capacity, which the Furworm grant has some capacity. We tried to expand that for our previous recommendations, and it doesn't seem to be going through, but that's a really good example of a place where we could make a really solid recommendation. Or if we wanted to go big, or if someone in the legislature wanted to introduce something like a seed fund for groups that are trying to form in specifically under-resourced communities, but really any community that's trying to connect all the different dots together. That would be another very specific example. And then the prescribed fire thing is the other thing that I think really could use legislative action. And that one, I don't feel like I have the expertise to recommend specific policy actions, but I know there's a lot of people who do have really good ideas for that. And one of them I'm going to pull in next week. He's going to talk about very specific prescribed fire issues and things that he would like to see happen. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that is super helpful. I think, as we're considering recommendations for next year, I think having those specifics would be amazing. And maybe we have a follow-up with you and others on the collaboratives, just to say these 3 would be the top priorities that we as the Forest Health Council could push forward. So yeah, thanks, Katie.
Yeah.
Just a reminder, we only have 5 total for recommendations. So if there's 6 here, we wouldn't be able to. And I'm feeling if you've mentioned before, Katie, the prescribed fire implementation, that might be more for the fire commission and for the subcommittee to be recommending than for us to be going into. So Courtney, I see your hand is up next. Thank you.
Yes, thanks so much, Katie. This was a really helpful presentation. I'm This is a question for you, but also just sort of a question about process. I'm thinking about the first recommendation about working directly with collaboratives to create, to like change programs or grants that are already being offered to more fit their needs. And so this is sort of a big question of, is this, because I know we can make recommendations in a few ways. There's like the legislative recommendations, there's the administrative recommendations, and then there's probably, yeah, I know those two tools. There might be other pathways. And I'm wondering if you guys are imagining, and maybe this is in the report, is this something that's legislative, or is this like an administrative recommendation to each agency that says like, hey, your grant programs all need to convene with collaboratives and make changes that support like the needs on the ground? Or is this some sort of, could this be a legislative action around funding to that like more specifically supports collaboratives needs? And there might not be an answer to that. That's kind of a vague, large question.
No, I totally understand. So the way I see it, number one, I think would be more of an administrative recommendation, or even just kind of a recommendation for us as a committee, to just pull in different collaborative representatives to give their on the ground perspectives. Number two, I would think would be more legislative, because that would be like creating a new grant program or something like that. Number three, I don't think is legislative. I think it's more of an administrative recommendation. As well as number four, I think that could be done in an administrative recommendation. 5 probably would have to be legislative. And 6, probably legislative.
Does that, you have more questions, Courtney?
No, I think that makes sense. I'm looking forward to reading the report and then maybe doing some follow-up questions with me too.
Great. Director McCombs, you have your hand raised.
Hey, thank you, Commissioner. So Kate, help me just, you touched on it a little bit, but with number 3, what does the formalization of support look like from your perspective? I'm just curious.
Yeah, this is something we talked about a lot. This was a new recommendation that we came up with. So the sort of letter that I shared from the Forest Service, I think, is an example where it's kind of leadership coming forward, which you have clearly, and so has Director Gibbs, come forward and said like, hey, we support collaboration. There's still seems to be maybe some feelings that like that's easier said from the top than being on the bottom, where you've got like all these other goals that you have to meet. And so I don't know if that's maybe like building in like each employee is allowed to pursue X number of professional development opportunities, or we maybe building in like an accomplishment that people can report on that says like, we went to this collaborative meeting and we, joined such and such group and came up with this plan together. Something like that, where people can feel like they're given that capacity to really partake in something that doesn't have a lot of like super clear outcomes right away. Like it's not always going to be acres treated or something, if you're just attending a collaborative meeting, but maybe it means that you're getting litigated less or that sort of thing. And so that letter, I think, is a good place to start. It honestly doesn't have, there's no like new mandates in it or anything, but it at least is designed to show people at all levels of the agency, like if you're doing this work, you are supported from all different levels of the agency.
No, that's helpful. I appreciate it. It's in our experience often we really can't keep our people out of these collaborative environments. They're going to participate, but the tension is they can be extremely work intensive and take a lot of time. And so you've got a lot of supervisory foresters in particular, folks that are out in the field that are really struggling to stay balanced in program development, planning, and implementation, with also participating in the collaborative planning space as well. And so there could be a piece there where we think about additional needs over time. We have one Scott Woods, right, that runs all over the place like a crazy person. He's our partnership coordinator for those of you that don't know, and tries to keep tabs on them and support the field level folks so that they can engage as well. But that may be a place where we could, think about needs. And we're in the process internally of really starting to yard up. Like, we expanded substantially, but we didn't really ask for any money, right? And so we're in this early stages internally trying to think about, like, how do we, be thoughtful about representing our needs. And one of the things that we could potentially use some dialogue and shaping on our thinking is here. So if we were going to try to increase our collaborative capacity internally, expand our partnership coordinator network to be more present and reduce some of that field burden, that could be a place where we could use some help to just think through what that might look like, and then how we might frame that appropriately internally as we work with CSU and DNR on budget requests going forward. So maybe think about it from that perspective. When I think formalization, I think from a policy standpoint, but policy directs resource needs. So think about, where would you want to replicate a Scott Woods, or where would you want to replicate, an Audrey Miles Cherney, or, like some of those people that we're hosting and staffing. Where does that, are they impacting appropriately or not appropriately, but in the way that the network would like to see them? And if not, how might that framework change? Because I think we'll have an opportunity here in the next few cycles to think that through. So I just was encouraging you to think about that formalization beyond policy, but also in personnel and support that personnel provides.
Yes, that is a great point. And I'm remembering in the detail, there actually is a point about like actually increasing the agency's capacity for that by, maybe adding a couple more Scott Woods. Scott is the best. He can never be replicated, but doing our best to get more Scott Woods out there.
Thank you, Director McCombs. That's exactly what I was thinking, was what is already in place that we could expand or leverage. So I think that was an excellent point. Thank you. Any other thoughts? So I also, I have a few. I just want to make sure everyone else had a chance to ask. When you talk about give ample time for collaboratives to prepare grant applications, and I'm wondering about what is ample time? Because I'm wondering, I guess it depends on the size. If there's one or two people, and maybe those agencies in their budget years, because the state has a different budget year, and maybe the U.S. Forest have a certain budget. I'm wondering, what is an ample time? Is it 3 months, or is just for them to get kind of in the groove, or as kind of our behavioral health grants that we have actually scheduled time for them to come in and sit down with the grant administrator and have meetings and talk. And because we give out 2.8 million every year, and there's 77 grants, and they, we have one person dedicate all this, and they have these scheduled times for them to come in and ask questions and get help, and actually hand-holding to do kind of the grant application, because we have a lot of startups. So I'm just thinking about the success of that and wondering if it's maybe, again, not like a legislative, as we're talking about administrative, and I just curious about what is ample time, or is it maybe just more assistance? Just curious.
Yeah, so an example that I can think of is, like, I've been talking to a couple of people about creating some sort of workshop in May to prepare people for the August and September grant round, because essentially what happens is usually the requests for proposals come out and they have maybe a couple of weeks or a month to go from request to proposal, pulling everything together, writing the grant, submitting the grant. And so even if maybe the application acceptance period is the same, what can agencies do to say hey, that this is going to come out in August. These are the types of criteria that we know already that we're going to be looking for. So here are some things that you can do in advance, so that when the request for proposal comes out, you're not just totally starting from a clean slate. So yeah, I think maybe a couple of months would be great. I think also a little bit of hand holding. I know that I think a lot of the grant programs try to do that. But that's always really helpful. And then also once the grants are given out, like a little bit of hand holding through the administration of keeping up with the grant.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you. Julie.
Thank you, Katie. I think you started to touch on this a little bit. I guess I was trying to understand. My question is around same item on the list here, but more these grants are, I guess, all coming from different agencies, and so what I was wondering was the sort of the why. Why did they all come out at the same time? Because that may not be able to be fixed. You touched on it a little bit, and so I think your idea of creating what I would refer to as self-help tools, right? So that folks can come to the table more prepared to allow those grant applications to get put together in a efficient way, so that with the few resources there are, you're making best use of those resources. That's kind of where my mind was going on how to be helpful around that that particular priority that you listed. So thank you. That was what I was trying to understand.
Okay. Yeah. And I don't really know why so many of them tend to come out at the same time. I don't know if that's like where the fiscal year falls and you got to have it all out by a certain time. I guess I hadn't really thought about that. But yeah, I mean, if it is a reason like that, where there's a good reason why it can't be changed, then yeah, some sort of other preparation or support so that people are not just feeling smacked with so many applications at one time.
Okay. So I wanted to ask another question about the successful building of, you talked about having more maybe advanced degree foresters and I'm curious with workforce development, a lot of this development has been for taking folks who are just starting or younger and kind of getting them into these fields. So wondering, because that's a common thing we've been talking about, and I'm sure it's all on our list of how we continue to solve the workforce development thing or challenge. So curious, do they have ideas? Because if it's specific workforce challenges, I'm not sure if that's contact universities and finding students who are already in the program or trying to reach nationally. I'm just trying to think about how, and just thoughts even from anybody on the committee, if there's more advanced folks, would it be work incentives or a sign-on bonus, funding to help attract folks, incentivizing people with skills? I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that, or the committee.
Yeah, I think the quote here, I think, kind of gets into that. So when I was talking to this person, and I'll pull her in for next meeting, but I think for these kind of higher level planner roles, like you said, like they do usually have like an advanced degree or something, and the State Forest Service has got a really cool program to get students through CSU, and CSU has great programs. But it seems like what's happening is based on the like limited timber industry, people who are trying to create like, say, a consulting forester business, like usually that relies somewhat on having an industry that's going to make them a profit, as opposed to just being like a public service employee. And so I think maybe what this one would look like is building up the industry related businesses, the wood processing facilities. And I was thinking about, I don't remember actually if this was I think this was on the legislative committee and not the leveraging resources committee. But Whitney Johnson came in and talked about the Mass Timber Coalition. And so maybe some of those recommendations could overlap into here, to where if we can bring the industry, then there will be more availability of these types of roles who want to come live in a really high cost of living state with traditionally less timber industry, because I think it's just hard for them to build a business here.
Great. That's helpful. Thank you. Okay, looking at time, is there any other questions? I'm sure we can always send some more questions through Courtney to give to Katie if you think about this afterwards. If not, I will close this item. Thank you, Katie, for the presentation and sharing. I think the quotes and things and some of the comments to share was really helpful to hear kind of in their voices. So thank you for that.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody. And like I said, I'll send out the more detailed list, and this has actually helped me to think through maybe some things that I could clarify in there as well.
Thank you. Okay, so Courtney, can we show kind of the timeline to show where we're at? And I apologize for my dogs being noisy. There's a bunch of elk in my yard and they just literally ran over my feet to get out the door. So I apologize for the noise.
No problem. We actually can't hear your background noise, Jody.
Good. I'm glad I didn't yell, ouch. So.
Okay, so I'm going to walk us through this calendar that we came up with. This is the week of, February 19th. So we're right here, week 8. We just had a presentation and a legislative update. For our next meeting, Katie is planning to bring a few people from different forest collaboratives to talk more specifically about some of these issues. So that's going to be really wonderful. I think especially if we can all read that detailed report before they come, we can be like really informed on the challenges and potential solutions. Then at our next meeting, what we have scheduled is just deliberation. We have 2 meetings of deliberation scheduled where we can continue to the committee can think through the recommendations that they've heard, the challenges, the opportunities, and pull something together. In April, we're planning, according to the calendar, to finalize the recommendations that can then be shared with the Forest Health Council. Right now we have in April, there is some dense meeting, and if we want to reimagine this, we can. But we had talked about having an open committee meeting where council members could show up and ask questions before the full Forest Health Council meeting at the end of April. So this is the calendar. We have plans to submit the recommendations to the State Department's May 1st. Does anyone have any questions about this? We have one more presentation and then a couple deliberation meetings and then sending recommendations to the full council.
It's just a funny thing.
Courtney, just to verify, when you say open committee, like the legislative committee is open to the full council? Did I understand that correct?
Yes, what we had discussed was inviting all, so we'll send out the recommendations. We'll say, these are the things the legislative committee is planning to recommend. Please join us the week of April 8th. And we can have an open conversation where council members can ask lots of questions or provide feedback. And if I would say, like, if we don't have enough deliberation meetings, we could push that a little bit and instead during the full Forest Health Council meeting have that conversation. It's a little hard to make changes on the fly at the Forest Health Council meeting just with so many people and such a tight agenda. But so that was our thought.
And I think also because the last time we had, we presented our ideas and we took a long time to remember that was like almost 45 minutes because that was the first time they heard it. And so we thought maybe if we gave it ahead of time and then they had questions, we could kind of make sure that was done, have other time to maybe not take so much time at the full council meeting. So I think this might also give them a chance to feel like it's not the first time they heard it and maybe they have questions. So, okay. So as you see, we're getting up to that time of getting ready for making some recommendations. So we have a list that we've already started and,
Yes.
And you all have access to that list to add things onto, correct, Courtney? That I think you've been
Yes.
sharing that a few times. So we have about, I'm going to say 3 minutes because I just want to make sure we don't go over time and honor your Fridays. But And so here's some ideas. Are we on? I think the workforce capacity, is that workforce? Yeah, that's what I was going to say is okay. Any other things you'd like to see on that list? And we can always continue to push anything that's on the previous list, since we didn't get there was that recommendation to add more into the co-swap workforce 25% to, it's supposed to be 25%. We asked to put another $1 million. So, some of those recommendations that didn't come before, I was thinking about those were good recommendations. We can always push those again. And I think there was the other one for the pipeline and the money for this, because we talked about the seeds and the development. So I just want to kind of, keep those that didn't get picked. Doesn't mean they weren't bad ideas. They just weren't forwarded. So I think it's always good to we don't have to always come up with some new great ideas. We can always push back and refine and maybe make sure that some of these ideas keeping front of the committee and keep kind of pushing that these are the same things. Director McCombs.
So just wanted to highlight for folks, James and I were in DC a couple weeks ago with NASF executive committee meeting and as well as Hill visits. And we also had a chance to work with the department and meet with some WO and U.S. Forest Service Washington office and USDA senior level officials. And I'm actually meeting with the reforestation program manager today here briefly. And we got some pretty clear indicators on what is going to be required to see some sizable investments in the nursery. And it's a lot of demand stimulation. So like we've been talking a lot about production, but there's really no plan coming together in Colorado how to reforest these landscapes that aren't recovering and to get the infrastructure in place to be ready to recover from the sizable impacts from fires we know are coming. So I just want to put a pin in there that like the reforestation pipeline, beyond the nursery, seed collection, seed storage, seed stratification, genetics, planting plans, and then planting itself and monitoring, like that whole other piece is something we haven't focused on. And we might be able to bring something interesting in the next couple of weeks, depending on how the conversations go up with DC. But we can attract some resources. There might be some need to put leverage in play. The other thing I'd just call out is the urban and community forestry programming continues to explode. The state received like $26 million across multiple municipalities. So that's another place where I think there's a lot of energy and excitement where we could look at, what are the gaps in community capacity to take advantage of those resources. So just a couple other issue areas to keep track of: urban and community forestry, and then the reforestation pipeline. A lot of energy and some potential resources that we could leverage at the federal level if there were appropriate state resources as well. So just a heads up there. And we can bring information to the table and presentations, but it's just not really ripe just yet, because I all I have is like head nods and winks. Once I get a firm handshake, maybe it'd be ripe to have further dialogue.
Thank you, Director McCombs. I think that's a fantastic idea. I think we do have to kind of make sure we're dealing with reforestation that's currently happening, that's currently desperately needed, but also preparing for, how we can get on the landscapes right away after we know there's more coming. So how do we help those forward? So I think that's great. And I think that's a great point about urban and community forestry. I think that's important. And maybe for some smaller communities, that might be a big gap. So that's very good. All right, we're almost done. Any other thoughts? But kind of keep those in mind, and we can kind of refine these with our deliberation meetings. And by no means are these set in stone or cement or something. It's just for us to kind of put these on a list as we're thinking about them after presentations and then get ready for this deliberation meetings. So any other comments? Our next meeting is March, let me see, because it's at March 8th, because even though because this one we moved back, are we still getting back? So it'd be March 8th anyway,
Yes.
because, yeah, okay. So with that, anything else, comments? Appreciate it. Great presentation. Good food for thought. Appreciate everyone being here today. All right, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
I'll move.
I'll second.
Great. Awesome. Thank you so much. Be looking for an agenda and all those in favor of adjourning? Aye.
Aye.
Adios. Thanks, everybody.
Happy Friday. Take care, everyone.
Bye all.
Credit.